Walter.
And I'm Janie Donaldson. Welcome to Quilt Central, where we celebrate quilting and everyday living.
Pull out those old photos because today we're going to show you how to use them in a quilt.
We have a talented long arm quilter who is going to demonstrate 3 different ways to quilt the same top.
And join us to take a look at the Museum of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Then we'll show you some creative ways to embellish your quilts. We know you will enjoy this show.
Quilt Central is made possible in part by Janome America. Janome, because you simply love to sew. American Quilters Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Sulky of America, makers of decorative threads, stabilizers, and books. Olfa, the original rotary cutting system. A1 Quilting Machines, precision quilting machines. A1. American Professional Quilting Systems, APQS, offers a full line of hand-guided quilting machines. June Taylor Company. Krause Publications. Milliken and Company. The Warm Company. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Welcome to Quilt Central, celebrating quilting and everyday living, with your hosts, Janie Donaldson and Cindy Walter.
Our talented guest is going to show us a wonderful way to put images on fabric. Let's welcome Marinda Stewart. Hi, Marinda.
Hi, Cindy. Nice to see you. Today I've brought you Printed Treasures. It's a wonderful fabric, 200 thread count, 100% Pima cotton, and it's designed to be used in your inkjet printer.
Okay, I see you have a piece in here that we just printed off.
Yes.
And
using a vintage photograph of my mother.
oh, beautiful.
Yes.
What did I do next?
Once it comes out, you just peel it off.
Okay. I
And
love
that's
Pima
it.
cotton because it has such a nice hand. It's such a high quality fabric.
I know.
And
It's
I
a joy to work with.
I think it gives you a better resolution when the picture is printed, huh?
Absolutely. And it's perfect to machine quilt with.
Okay. And so here we have one that another type of photograph.
We have lots of photographs. That's what most people want to use this process for, is to capture memories onto fabric and turn them into treasured heirlooms.
Right, how
So this
wonderful.
is a photograph that was taken by my nephew, Sean Stewart, printed on the fabric, and then I've got it set up to quilt, but I haven't quilted it yet.
I can see that the high quality fabric here, this resolution is just perfect in this
Yeah,
area.
you can almost see the needles on the pine trees.
You can, and this wonderful tip that you've done is you've used the inner framing border with the bigger outer border. It looks like it's been matted in frame, like a...
I tend to be of the school, if I'm using a photograph, I like it to look like a photograph, so I even leave the 1/4 inch
You
white
did.
border around it like you usually find on a matted
It's absolutely
photograph.
beautiful.
This is another one that was done the same way, only this one's been completely quilted, and this shows a color photograph instead of a black and white.
And it's
it started out
absolutely-
just from a snapshot.
And you've pulled the colors from the photograph out to match
the border.
everything. Yeah,
Yes.
great idea.
Absolutely. But, you know, as I said, photographs are the thing, family photographs. This vest is called Family Ties and is made up of dozens of family photographs.
Wow.
They're all printed in black and white, and because
Wow.
they're such tiny images,
Oh, here
I
you-
did multiple printings.
Oh, so in other words, you set all the photographs on your scanner and you scanned them in groups like this, so that when you would print them off, you wouldn't waste the paper fabric, and you could print several on one sheet.
And the only thing you need to take into consideration when you do this is to leave enough margin for you to sew with.
I see. Oh, you need the 1/4 inch.
You need
This
the
is
1/4 inch
absolutely
margin.
beautiful how you collage these pictures around as part of
Thank
the whole
you.
garment.
Thank you. This is
very,
one of my favorite things.
Very special. Oh, the back's pretty too. Wow, that's a very special garment.
It is.
Great. Yeah,
And some of the
wonderful.
photographs in it are really quite funny.
Now, so we've seen that we can do photographs of people. What else can we do?
Well, you can do anything that you can print and scan, you can print on fabric. And you can do labels, custom labels. It's fabulous. These are vintage postcards.
They're beautiful, and you
I
made
collect
labels
vintage,
out of them.
yes, I collect vintage postcards whenever I find something that I think is interesting or that I can use. And I thought these were particularly wonderful because this one's got a to and from, and because the other two have got blank spaces on them where you can write on them with indelible pens.
You know, one interesting thing that the scanner or the printer and the paper is so good that you could pick up even the yellowing, how the paper is slightly yellowed.
Absolutely.
Like
It'll
on here,
print
it's
whatever it
slightly
sees.
yellowed. It's absolutely beautiful. So, and you know, with the Pima cotton, I know that you can write on it with a permanent pen or any of those ink tools that are permanent.
Absolutely.
So you could write your
And a
whole
little
envelope.
tip on doing that is if you know what you're going to write on them, write on it before you've peeled off the paper backing. And then
Oh,
your
it's a
fabric
stabilizer.
won't squiggle on you.
That's a great idea.
So that's a wonderful tip.
I saw we had a couple different types of labels
Well,
too.
I tried to bring a couple of different labels. This is copyright-free art. This one was a little bit small originally, so I enlarged it, printed both of them on one sheet of paper, fabric, and then cut them apart, and then I used fabric marking pens in the colors so that you can custom color your labels in.
So you could actually have colored this first, but if you
I
want to
could have colored
save
it
your
first,
if you want to save your ink from your printer, you can color it afterwards right on the
Exactly.
fabric. Great idea.
Exactly. Or perhaps you want to print up some labels and you don't know what colors you want to use yet on the back of your quilt.
Oh, that's right. You can pre-print them. And I noticed we have a stamp. Why would you not just stamp instead of printing
There
it
are
out?
fabric stamp pads that you can use. I prefer doing it on paper first and then printing it because I get a better, crisper, cleaner design resolution.
What a great idea, because sometimes on the fabric, the stamps aren't, you know, they're not solid. They're all messed up.
And paper is not porous like fabric is,
Right.
even 200 thread count.
Yeah, that's a great tip on that one. This is an interesting project that you have here.
Well, that looks kind of strange. Sometimes you know exactly what you want fabric to look like, but you can't find it. In this instance, I had this wonderful strange gold, actually what it is made of is the rip-proof mailing envelopes.
Oh, okay.
But it's not suitable for a quilt, but I love the
writing
texture.
here.
So I printed that and some paper collage work that I did onto fabric, and now I've got little squares of fabric that I can use, cut up and use in a quilt.
So you've actually created your own fabric.
I've
for
created
yourself.
my own one-of-a-kind fabric. Nobody in the world has got that but me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, and it gives you such design freedom in terms of creating stuff. You paint on fabric all the time.
That's right. I could just print out my own
You could
fabric.
print out, or if perhaps there's a drawing that you made when you were in one of your travels or something. So,
Now, this is wonderful. This looks like kids' art.
back to memories. This is the wonderful way to use children's art. We both know how wonderful children's art is and how inspired it is and uncomplicated. So there are children's drawings here. The pillow, my neighbor Ashley did the drawing of the cat when she was like maybe 11 or 12. I decided the cat was the most wonderful thing in the drawing, so I enlarged it, printed it on the fabric, and then fused it onto the quilt.
Yeah, this is super. This is a designer pillow now.
It's a designer pillow, and actually, if I wanted to do more of it, I could make a series of blocks and turn it into a quilt.
That's right. And how about the great tote bag?
The tote bag is also Ashley's art. She did that when she was 9, which is really scary. But her mother says that all of the kids in class ended up with the same quality of work. I made a photocopy of the original artwork, printed it on the fabric, and then just sewed it on the tote bag.
Wow, it's really nice.
And this, with the quality of this art, this makes it a gift that a grandmother or an aunt or somebody would really love. It's not quite so cutesy as some of the things. It's got a level of sophistication about
the
it.
quilt behind us, this photograph quilt, tell me about that.
Those are photographs of Mark Dennis. He's a fabulous photographer. As you can see, does marvelous nature photography. And those are all his photographs printed on the Printed Treasures fabric and made into this wonderful, bright, colorful quilt.
Yeah, it's very clear too. It's just
Clear.
so bright.
You
looks
feel like
it's
you can
fabric.
smell the flowers, or the butterflies are going to land on your fingers any
That's
moment.
right. Now this is one of my very favorites.
This
I
is
mean,
one of
this
my
is just-
favorites too. This is a quilt that's a tribute to my dad's mother. Her name was Jenny. That's her picture in the upper right-hand corner. And this is some of the things that happened in her life. I've got a baby photograph. I've got photographs of her when she had my uncle and then had my dad. And in this square down here, this is her courtship with my grandfather. When they were dating,
Oh, wow.
this was their wedding day.
Oh my goodness.
And then this photograph was their 50th wedding
Oh
anniversary.
my goodness, this has to bring tears to your eyes every
It
time I
does.
see
It's
it 'cause
really very
so
special.
I like also how that when you take your photographs, you embellish it with other memorabilia, like perhaps the rose they wore or the
Exactly.
the
I
lace.
think those kinds of things add an extra dimension, literally and figuratively, to your finished piece.
It's gorgeous.
These are vintage flowers that my mother wore that are kind of dreary little violets now, and ribbon roses that you can make, and then of course wonderful mother of pearl buttons.
Give me a quick tip on what's the best types of photographs to use in this sort of
You want photographs with good contrast in them. This is a photograph. Actually, this photograph started out the size of a dime, and this is Jenny. And I enlarged this 400% to get to this quality.
Wow, and that's clear. Let's see one more.
And now it can be printed. This is a photograph of her husband, my granddad. This is the original. This is the enlarged photograph in the sepia tone.
It's beautiful. You know, I love when you come on the show because you always have such wonderful tips, and I can't wait to make a memory quilt of my family too. Thank you.
It's been fun.
Today we have with us Dawn Cavanaugh. She's a celebrity long arm teacher, and she has some wonderful comparison quilts for us today. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Janie. Thanks for asking me back.
Oh, we're always delighted when you come.
Thank you. I've brought along some comparison quilts today to show you because I found that as professional quilters, we work so hard on one particular quilt and then it's all done, goes out with the customer, and we think, gee, if only I'd have done something a little different here or there. This gives a quilter a good opportunity to experiment with ideas or techniques without a lot of money and not a lot of time, but have some critique and way to decide what you really want to do with that quilt.
That's a good idea.
Thank you. What I'd like to show you is the differences between the quilts and then jump into doing some quilting for you.
Okay.
The first one is more traditional. It has a feather around the center of it and a wandering feather around the outside. Very simple and straightforward to do. The second quilt that we'll take a look at is a lot more contemporary in my mind anyway. It uses some metallic threads and also does some couching techniques to help make some lines more bold in the quilt. And the third one explores using the circle makers that many of the quilts come with today and taking that a step further and embellishing the circles themselves.
That's the one I'm so crazy about. It has an embossed look to it.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of fun to do. And we'll try some right now if that's okay.
Sure.
Well, the first one we're going to do is use the circle maker that I have already put in place with your machine to make some circles. Use a stitch regulator if you happen to have it on your machine. Then the lines will be pretty good for you and straight. The stitches will be even as well. I'm just going to quilt a few feathers on the outside for you.
Okay.
When you first start this technique, you may want to use a mark of some sort, chalk, to draw a reference line for yourself so that you know how far out to make those feathers to go. I'm pretty free-flowing and easy, and if you looked really close, you'd see that my feathers weren't perfect, but I'm happy with them. So I'm going to start off now making some feathers around this circle. See, it doesn't take a lot of effort, and with that circle in place, it's very easy to get them in position.
Right.
Not very hard.
No, beautiful.
The circle can also be used to do feathers inside the feathers as well, so you can do wreaths that way as well. Let's jump onto the circle itself and do some interesting designs in the middle here.
Okay.
I like to work from the inside out, and you'll first need to know where the center of your circle is, and I didn't mark that today, but we're just going to eyeball it and say that looks pretty good. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Good for eyeballing. I'm going to raise up the needle positioner and take a couple of tiny stitches to secure my threads. Just basically going to repeat the design that is on that embossed looking quilt as you so nicely referred to it. I will start with some gentle arcing curves from the center out, trying to touch the very edge of that circle, and simply continue repeating it all the way around. Well, generally, you might use a thread that's a little more blending rather than this pretty pink that we're using to show up today.
Beautiful medallion. Star-like or bursting. The curves give it some motion.
It does. It gives it some very nice motion. As you approach the other end, start looking ahead to make sure that you're going to run into the same general curve that you did before. And then end in the center, and again take your securing stitches. I'm going to raise the needle up and jump out to our next row here and do some tiny circles that repeat in there. Actually, I'm going to go to the next one. It should be fairly simple. I'm going to jump out to the next one. Just because it's a little wider and we'll be able to see. I will make those in a figure 8 kind of motion, Janie, so that they look less connected and will look more round. So I'm going to make the first part and then come down here and make the second one like a figure 8. And when you're at home and not nervous sitting in front of all these wonderful people who are quilters, you do a little bit better job. But ideally, you want to get all the way out to the edges there, touch those, and continue around. Now if you use a batting that has a little depth to it, that's also going to make that embossing appear
little
more great.
Pillows
Yes.
in there.
Make that tufted up some more, and by leaving some blank spaces you get some of the relief that you see. And this last area, what I'd like to do is kind of a complement to this. I will jump out to that area, carry my threads across. Normally you'd secure those as well. And simply start arching the line all the way up the circle.
That adds a lot of texture.
It does. Now you certainly have some freedom to do whatever you want in there. You can start making that a little more Aztec and add some dimension like this. You can even go back and start making some stars if you want to.
Oh, so many ideas.
Yeah.
Just whatever strikes you.
Whatever strikes you, and start playing around. You'll find once you experiment, you're going to find a lot more fun things to do. And the last thing I'd like to show you, Janie, is how I did the couching technique on the more contemporary quilt. I used a ribbon that you'll notice has a frayed edge on it, and that can become difficult to work with. So a little dab of a sealer on the end, like a fray check, will help you, or turn it under as you apply it to the quilt.
Good idea.
You can also simply leave the end free, and when you start your stitching, pull it through with a needle to the back side or inside the layers of the quilt.
That idea I like too.
Oh, it works very well. I'm going to take one single stitch here to bring up my bobbin thread so that we can start. And by folding over the edge of that ribbon, I'll get a clean, crisp edge. Put it underneath the foot. Keep your fingers out of the way, obviously. And using your single stitch button, you can take a couple of stitches over it to begin. Once you've got it in place, simply use your hand to start wiggling over the ribbon in place. Just little zigzags, and you'll notice on the quilt itself I had already stitched a line to give me a guide. You can mark that on if you'd rather, or use an invisible stitch, thread rather, to keep it in position. And simply keep going as you're dragging the thread along. If it has a little bit of bias to it, you won't have any problems with that.
Oh, that seems to bend around there so nice.
Oh, it does. Also, if your ribbon tends to have any kind of flat spots in it, you may want to make sure that you zigzag all the way over to the edge so you don't have any pieces that are lifting up as well.
Beautiful.
This technique also works well with yarns. You'll just want to watch if you get anything that has any knots or anything like that, because they will tend to catch underneath the foot for you.
I absolutely love that sparkle and that contemporary look, and it seems so simple to do.
It's very simple.
I'm really glad you brought these comparison quilts for us to see today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Quilting has a rich history in our country, and both of our mothers are daughters of the American Revolution.
Yeah, in fact, one of my great-grandmothers was honored by the DAR for public service because she actually collected blankets and clothing and sheets and everything to make uniforms for the soldiers during the American Revolution. So I hope you'll enjoy our visit to the museum.
Welcome to the quilt collection of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Within these walls are hundreds of quilts that tell the story of America, particularly American women of the 18th and 19th centuries. The DAR has been collecting quilts since the society itself was founded in 1890. Today, with about 350 quilts, the collection is acknowledged by scholars to be one of the most significant in the world.
What's interesting to me about the quilts in this collection is that they're really, truly documents of American history. We know who most of their makers are. We can do genealogical research and find out what their everyday life was like. It tells us about the way women lived in the 18th and 19th century.
Join us now as we take a look at some of the special quilts in the DAR Museum and the unique stories of America they tell. The wife of Francis Scott Key is one of the most prominent quilt makers represented in the DAR Museum's collection. Mary Taylor Lloyd Key, whose husband wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, made the quilt during the 1840s in Baltimore. The pattern for this pieced quilt was 5 blazing stars and shows a good example of the types of fabrics that were available to Baltimore quilt makers. 100 years later, in 1942, the counterpaint quilt was presented to the museum by Key's granddaughter. She wrote that the quilt was in storage from 1858 until 1925, when it was discovered with her grandmother's personal belongings. Like this bed cover, more than 80% of the DAR's quilts have a documented family history. The DAR is playing its part in continuing the tradition of quilting in America. Each summer, the museum brings 25 children together to learn the history and techniques of quilting.
I have my quilt from the past 2 years hung up over my fireplace on the mantle, and I'm going to hang this one beside them. The best part of making a quilt, I think, though, is like looking at your finished product and like when it's all done, like seeing like you made this and it's like really nice and stuff. Each quilt has a story. Like the quilt that we got this pattern from was made in 1850 and had been passed down generation to generation, and I thought that was really neat, and I liked that a lot.
Besides learning just about the techniques of applique or piecing, we're passing on a little bit of the excitement about looking at these old quilts.
American Quilts. The Daughters of the American Revolution has been collecting these beautiful bed covers since the Society was founded in 1890. They fulfill the Society's goals of documenting the achievements of American women, and they tell the story of America.
We have Nancy Knaus back with us today, and she has some wonderful things to show you with the home quilting system. Hi, Nancy.
Well, hi, Janie. It's great to be with you again today.
I know that you have a very busy schedule. You're traveling everywhere, and so am I, and we like to quilt, but it's got to be something speedy, and we can't get too involved with patchwork. And you have a project today that's pretty speedy.
Well, it is. What I was going to do, I've always done, or I've seen a lot of where the quilters have stenciled some flowers or just things in there. I'm just, I look and I go, oh my God, they spent all this time doing the applique, and you would get it looking at it up close and you go, oh, she cheated, she stenciled. So I thought, why can't I do that? So I went ahead and I just stenciled. Well, first I gridded it out. It was a pencil grid that I did on the fabric. And then once I did that, then I stenciled in the areas that I did with just some paints, and then with a stencil brush, I just took my little stencil here, I laid it out, and then I just dabbed it in and filled in the space, and then I embellished it with the thread on that. And then I was going to cut it apart and then make it into blocks, and I go, oh, that takes so much time, so I go, why can't I go through my stash and get some type of yarns or rickrack or something and put in it, because nowadays you've just used about any type of medium on your quilts. I mean, it's not where you just thread only.
Embellishment is the thing.
Exactly. So what I did was I put the walking foot on my sewing machine, I laid out this rickrack, and then I just used the walking foot to put it down.
That would work great because the walking foot would keep it perfectly straight in the rows.
Right.
And then to do it going vertically, you turn your piece on the system and pin it tight and go the other way, right?
Right.
Oh, that's a good idea. I know that the thread in here that is so sparkly is sometimes difficult to run an industrial head, but these home quilting systems just carry a regular domestic machine, and then the trickier threads seem to run so much easier that way.
Well, that's because it's your sewing machine. You've used it for years, and you're familiar with how to set it up, how to adjust the tensions, and to work with it. So that's what makes it so much easier. And then plus you can get a little more intricate in detail and outline it a little bit more and add more thread into it than you would like with your big commercial. So, there's the advantages of using the smaller home systems.
I see that. Well, this is a beautiful way to make something quick, whether you just use it for a pillowcase or a wall hanging or dresser scarf. And I thank you so much for showing this technique to us.
Sure, and you're welcome, and thank you for having me back.
Those were great embellishment tips.
Yes. In fact, this whole show has been full of great tips. And next week, I'm here at Quilt Central alone. Cindy's off to Alaska.
That's right, Jeannie. I know it's a tough job, but someone's got to teach on the quilting cruise. Actually, I'm honored because there'll be 5 of the teachers on this cruise, and we've got a lot of exciting places scheduled to stop. And we're going to visit a few quilt shops, and we get to take a helicopter ride on top of a glacier.
So see you next week when we check in with Cindy on the cruise and learn how to make circles on the long arm. So see you then.
Quilt around the clock. Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program.
Really beautiful, and you've pulled the colors from to
maximize the photograph.
Excuse me. That fly was in my face the whole time.
The whole
he landed
time.
on my nose.
Quilting has a rich history in our country, and both of our mummers. You know, you're contagious. You're contagious. Okay, let's go.
Quilt Central is made possible in part by Janome America. Janome, because you simply love to sew. American Quilters Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Sulky of America, makers of decorative threads, stabilizers, and books. Olfa, the original rotary cutting system. A1 Quilting Machines, precision quilting machines. A1. American Professional Quilting Systems, APQS, offers a full line of hand-guided quilting machines. June Taylor Company. Krause Publications. Milliken and Company. The Warm Company. Additional funding was provided by these companies that care about quilting. Now you can celebrate quilting in your everyday living. To purchase videotapes of this or any episode of Quilt Central, you may call toll-free 1-866-PADUCA or 1-866-723-8224.